The longest minute in the world, 6:59.
It's funny, isn't it?
Yes.
You can hear every tick of the clock. Right?
All gets quiet. I just watch this little corner number.
I really appreciate something like this with the street sign and I'm parking where the rest of us get involved.
Yes.
It's great.
Which would you prefer?
Well, I can get the update, and then if they have questions.
I think that makes more sense.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, when they take the time to, you know, get involved, to take pictures, and really think about it and ask the neighbors, it's awesome. It's cool.
It is. It's how it should work.
Exactly.
Okay, Dan, ready? Now we're ready. Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this combined workshop and special meeting of your Board of Trustees. To honor our nation's heroes, and especially to honor the men and women in uniform who serve and protect our community, please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Clerk Fitzgerald, may we have the roll call, please?
Certainly, President Gallagher. Trustee Hansen?
Here.
Trustee Timmick?
Here.
Trustee Allen?
Here.
Trustee Rudolph?
Here.
Trustee Sipler is absent. Trustee Terrell?
Here.
Thank you. Having read the agenda, does any trustee have an addition or deletion to tonight's agenda? Hearing none, we'll move on to citizen comments. This is the time that we open the meeting up to the public to address the board. However, I understand there are people here on two specific issues, so I recommend that you wait until that issue is addressed by the board, and then we will take your comments after their reports. So if there is anyone here that's not with the Ridgewood Oaks Basin or with the proposed no parking zone on Chestnut, now's your opportunity to approach the board. Okay, in that case, we'll move on to consideration of agenda items for the workshop portion of our combined meeting. Moving on to Public Works, right? Public Works and Water, Trustee Allen.
Thank you, President Gallagher. It's a rather lengthy agenda, although there are some good items in here to go over as well too. Item A, capital summary report. We've talked about this before. Staff has been working to redesign the format to make it both a little more informative for us and also a little bit easier to prepare and maintain. They presented a draft to both the Public Works and Water and Props and Rec. And we both liked the format and made a few suggestions. So hopefully, probably in the next month cycle, we'll be able to see the 2019 projects rolled into that. Item B is the Ridgewood Oaks cost share. And I'll go through, just kind of lay a little bit of a summary for it. And then if residents want to comment, it'd be a great time after I give you an overview. In our packet is a memo from J.J. Bennis and Associates, the project engineer. But before I go into that, the Ridgewood Oaks project, this is a detention basin on the sort of the west end of the property that abuts the Ridgewood area. And the design is to have a detention basin added there that will help with the runoff coming off a little bit east of that property, right along Wolf Road. The water during a heavy storm event does create a tremendous amount of water flooding all the way down to Flat Creek. In any event, this was something that generally would be the responsibility of the homeowners, or in this case, the homeowners association. However, it was something that went through sort of a special service area process. We've done this previously with the village. It's a little bit of a custom because each project tends to be unique and have different features and things like that. But the memo from our engineering firm tried to look at how to fairly proportion the cost between the villages and the residents of Ridgewood Oaks. They came up with two proposals. One ended up being a 20% cost share and the other being a 25% cost share. And their methodology was to look at sort of the rainwater coming off and how it would change or improve with the addition of this detention basin. And they looked at both a 2-hour rain event, they call it a 100-year event, really that's more like a 1% probability. And they looked at a 24-hour event. And there was definitely an improvement that would benefit the rest of the village. And we discussed it at committee, and the two items were the 20-25%, and the committee felt that the 25% was a better representation, primarily because of the Cook County Watershed Management Ordinance kind of specifies that you use a 24-hour period. So roughly, just to kind of go over a couple numbers with y'all, the project, if you divide it over the 60 or so pins that make up the Ridgewood Homeowners Association, that's in the neighborhood of $5,000 to $6,000 per homeowner that would be assessed as part of the special service area, and then the village would pick up the other 25%. So it'd be a 25-75% cost share. I think we're still working over some of the financial details over like what type of time period that would be, and I think doing some of the legal work to get the special service area finalized. But what the Public Works and Water Committee recommended was the 25% cost share, with the 25% borne by the village, the 75% borne by the residents, and that project is scheduled for 2019. So that's my overview, but I'd love to open for if there's comments from the citizens on that.
So was the committee's recommendation to go with the 25% share with the village as opposed to 20%?
Correct, that's right.
Okay.
But with some of the financing details, like the time period and the interest rate, if there would be one, to be determined under final documentation.
Thank you. Would anybody like to address the board regarding the Ridgewood Oaks Basin?
Hello,
Hello.
Hi.
Please just tell us your name and.
my name is Emily Feister. That's F-I-S-T-E-R. I'm at 5808 Wolf Road in Ridgewood Oaks condos.
I'm Lily Vokmarovic. I also reside at Ridgewood Oaks at 5804 Wolf Road, Unit 38.
And we are both board members of the condo board. Trustee Allen brought up some things that we were not aware of. So we never heard the 25%. That's brand new to us right now. So that does make it a little more palatable to us. But we just wanted to ask a question. I don't know if you know this or this is to be answered later. Is that has there been, to our knowledge, there's not been a flooding issue within our area at all. So I think what you're saying by your statements is that it's a detention issue for us, but the flooding is happening somewhere else. Is that correct? From what
I'll
you
let
understand?
Director Super direct that question. Thank you.
Sure. I mean, that's kind of a simplified way to look at it. Back in 2015, when we started this process, we did 2 stormwater studies in the area. It was the broader one that looked at the Ridgewood subdivision as the whole, and then we did a more localized stormwater study that looked at basically the east side, including your guys' detention basin, as well as the cul-de-sacs along that area. As part of that study, we determined, or we found out that detention basin as it sits today is not meeting the detention requirements that was specified or permitted for when it was originally constructed.
From 1978.
Yeah, I don't remember what the exact date was off the top
So
of
it
my head.
hasn't been touched for 40 years.
Right, so it was permitted to the HOA from the district, being the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District at that time. And because it's not holding the water that it's supposed to be holding right now, that water is sent downstream to the village's storm sewer system. And it's not designed to take that water in that flow capacity because it was designed with the intent that you guys would contain the water upstream. So what we're trying to do is coordinate with the HOA. We've been working with Stan, I can't remember his last name, but he's the HOA president.
He would be here, except he's in
I believe he's in Florida right now.
Yes.
He's the HOA president. We've been working with him for the past about a year, and there was an HOA present prior to that, whose name's escaping me, to kind of rectify and get you guys back up to your permit requirements with the district. So the village has kind of offered our hand to help, drive the ship, so to speak, to get the project moving forward.
Okay, so I guess we're just here to tell you our situation right now. We've spent over $200,000 for the fire protection system that was required by the village. That was last year. We have an additional $60,000 in maintenance every year for that system. We have a major maintenance project for the balconies for last year that was $200,000. And this year we have a re-roofing project for $200,000. All of these have required either special assessments or monthly fee increases. And we have many seniors in our complex who are on fixed incomes, and we are very concerned about the impact of this project and the effect on the future taxes. We are estimating $7,000 to $10,000 based on the 20%, and that would be an increase of 17 to 28% of our taxes for 5 to 6 years if it was a special assessment, which is a huge amount for most of us. So we're just asking you to reconsider the scope of the project, if it can be smaller in scope, or to increase the participation rate.
Well, I might start if you wanted to
Sure,
jump in,
go
or
ahead,
Director
Ray.
Super. Great points. Totally very sensitive to the fire protection, the re-roofing, and the balcony. This is a project that's been looked at for several years now for the village. I think there is some flexibility in terms of potentially stretching it out over a longer period of time, so the impact is not, as immediate. In terms of the cost sharing, this allocation, and Attorney Drusik can jump in as well too. We're restricted in providing village resources for repairs that, I don't want to call them quite repairs, but projects that benefit a specific area. And we try to come up with a methodology to be as fair as possible. This happened recently in Rosen Garden on the north side of town, where they needed water mains replaced that were behind their property, and we needed to move those to the front, and they had to bear that cost. But anyway, so we looked at it. We went with the higher of the two estimates that was supported by an engineering study with the 25% cost share. In terms of the cost, and Director Super can add as well, one of the things that drove up the cost was they found some buried concrete on the property that is causing how the footings for the new wall to be put in to add extra costs as well too. The estimates are still, because it has not been out to bid,
Right.
The estimates are not final yet.
And that's a little scary too. We have an estimate, but we have no idea if it's going to be $300,000 or $1 million. And we can all do estimates.
Fair comment. I don't know if anyone else would like to add to that.
Yeah, we'll work with our Director of Finance to see if we can come up with a solution with regard to the fees, so that it's not onerous for you and your fellow condo owners. We appreciate that this is a substantial amount added on to other costs that you have to bear right now, so we're sensitive to that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Because 95% of the homeowners are above the age of 70.
Oh, yeah.
Thank
All right, thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you
for
both
your
for
time.
coming forward. Item C is the sidewalk replacement. This is typically just a routine project for the village. You can see a memo from Director Super dated February 6th. The trick here, or maybe not the trick, but what happened with this one, normally what they would do is they try to get a unit cost to repair a sidewalk, and then based on that unit cost, they would define how many sidewalk, like squares, if you will, we can actually do within a budgeted amount of, for this year, is $95,000. And then they would staff would prioritize which sidewalks are in the worst shape and try to do those in sort of a highest priority to lowest priority type system. There was a little bit of confusion potentially on those unit sizes, because it wasn't clear how the entire scope of the project was, and the low bid contractor did not have the required experience with a project of the size that we are actually trying to do. So for those reasons, it was recommended that to avoid any confusion and just be cleaner to rebid the entire thing with an estimate of what the full scope of the project would be, and trying to get cute, and my word, get a unit price and then try to extrapolate that to how many we could do. So we're going to try to estimate to get close to that $95,000 budget, what sort of size they would be. It's a little bit guesswork because different squares have different sidewalks might have different sizes or needs of repair. So anyway, that was the recommendation, and we discussed it at the committee level and agreed as well too. Item D is the street sweeps. There's also a memo in your packet on that. This is also a recurring type service. We did get a bid from Lakeshore, which was previously known as Hoving. Been a vendor for ours for several years. It's a little bit just to clarify on the memo in our packets on that. There's a minimum of full 8 sweeps of the whole village. There's a budgeted amount of $65,000, and even though the bid was slightly more, that included some optional street sweeps depending on needs and conditions. And staff typically would manage that to stay within the budgeted parameters. So we recommended and would like to put on the omnibus, unless there's any questions, that the contract gets awarded to Lakeshore Recycling with their $71,000 bid.
Okay, we'll put that on the omnibus.
Thank you. Item E is the well number 5 drill bid. The good news here is we are favorable to budget. There was a single bidder on this one. There's a memo in our packet from Plant Superintendent Duffy and the contract amount from Lane Christensen, who we've had experience with before, is $1,149,000 rounded. This project is, all part of the well number 5. It's broken into 3 components. It's sort of in the April-May type time frame when to commence on that. So in any event, we discussed it at the committee level and recommended to put on the omnibus that Lane Christensen get awarded the well number 5 drill bid. And again, that was favorable to budget.
Trustee Allen?
Yes.
Is it unusual to have just one bid for a project of this magnitude? $1 million and...
Yeah, I'll start and I'll let Director Super clarify. I think it's a fairly technical type project with that drilling and having the equipment and experience and expertise.
I mean, I saw
and being
that.
in the area, but Director Super, do you have anything else?
You're absolutely correct. It's a very specialized field, especially in the Midwest. There's a handful of contractors in the entire Midwest that do this sort of work. Lane Christensen's based out of Illinois. They've done the vast majority of the well drilling that occurs in most of central and western Illinois.
Have we used them before? Are we
They are who you do for our maintenance contract. Yeah.
All right.
So I wonder if that has something to do with it too, because they are, historically, they have been our contractor with the servicing the wells, so perhaps other.
No, there aren't that many companies out there that do jobs this size.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Item F, well number 5 transmission. This one's a little more generic, and to Trustee Terrell's point, we did get more bidders on this one. Again, there's a memo from Plant Superintendent Duffy. The low-cost bidder was Swallow Construction for an amount of roughly $410,000. We discussed it at the committee, and staff came in with a recommendation to award the contract to Swallow Construction. Again, on the good news standpoint, it is favorable to what we have in the 2019 budget. I do want to point out a couple of things that are mentioned in the memo just for our residents. This is, and in addition to the previous one mentioned, this is all being financed by an IEPA loan. That's the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency. It's a very low interest rate that we'll pay on that borrowing, but it does require some maintenance or project supervision, and that will be in addition, and that will be run by Baxter and Woodman. And correct me if I'm wrong, Director Super, but those amounts, I believe, have not yet quite been finalized, the kind of contract.
I actually just received the proposals last Friday, so we'll be presenting that to the committee over the next 7 days.
Okay. Again, and that's in the transmission is to take it from, by the school, over to the water treatment plant. It's a few block jog, but that will bring it to the water treatment plant. And that's the transmission. Item G is the low pressure reverse osmosis membrane replacement. We've talked about this previously, but really these membranes are the heart of a reverse osmosis system, and basically you're pushing the water under pressure against these membranes, and they really filter out basically any type of impurity, so you get pure distilled water on the end. They are the original membranes, and although they're cleaned periodically, they do have a shelf life, and they've reached it. You can see in there another memo from Ms. Duffy, and we recommending that we go ahead and do 2 at the same time, back to back. And the water treatment plant has, staff calls them trains, but there's 2 trains really geared for one for each of our 2 deep wells. But not to get confused, there will not be a 3rd train with the new well number 5. There's simply not room there. Well number 5 will be integrated so it can flow through the 2 existing trains. But correct me if I'm wrong, they're each about a week or 2 to replace the membrane, with the testing and the setup. And this was also discussed at the committee level, and we concurred with staff recommendation to award the contract to Wigan as the low-cost bidder. And I believe that was one where they were the only bidder, or just the low cost on that one. Any questions on the reverse osmosis? Item H, Clausen Avenue additional sidewalks. Clausen Avenue is the primary, and I should say North Clausen Avenue, is the primary road construction project for 2019. And staff, in looking at it, brought up an interesting idea that on the very north side near 49th, 50th, and to Ogden Avenue, we sort of have that incomplete patchwork sidewalk system. There's actually a map in your packet, and staff recognized that it would be kind of cost advantageous and from a timing perspective good to or at least efficient to add some of the sidewalks where there aren't any at this time, and they kind of documented some of the reasons why they thought that would be a good idea. We discussed it at the committee level, and both trustees expressed some concern over it, however, for a couple reasons. One is that that block has partial sidewalks. I think it had 3 sidewalks existing, and the proposal on one block was to add 4 more. Cost is roughly $4,000 to $5,000 per sidewalk, and we thought there might be an unfair issue for the homeowners that had just recently put in their sidewalks to have paid for them to have paid for their own sidewalks, but then for the village to pay for the sidewalks for the other homes, just to get it as a consistent look. Plus, with some of the preliminary numbers, if you will, coming out of the road referendum, we were hesitant to commit to doing this as a system-wide and setting a precedent that we would my bad term there, to add new sidewalks on blocks, that we do concrete reconstruction throughout the village. So for those reasons, we were not recommending going forward and having the village fund the cost of the sidewalk replacements at this time. However, I think staff is going to follow up with the residents there and see if they would be interested in doing it at this time, because it makes some sense to complete while the roads are under construction.
Just when you said it was $4,000 to $5,000 per sidewalk, can you define how you're identifying a sidewalk? Is it each length?
But they're not. Yeah, that's a fair question. They're not all equal length, and
Yeah.
it gets a little confusing. I think the bid was $16,000 or $17,000
In total?
To do the whole
4,
thing?
and in total, correct.
Okay.
And there's 4 on the one block. I don't remember if we had it for the second block to Ogden Avenue, which was 2 homes that didn't have anything there previously. So you're right. It could be a low, within plus or minus a few $100s between the different properties. You're right. Good
Okay.
point.
Just want to make sure I understood. Okay, thanks.
Unless there's any other questions, that concludes my report for this evening.
Thank you, Trustee Allen. I did have one question regarding the well 5 drill
Yeah.
bid. You said April to May start date. Is there a reason why that's delayed a few months?
Well, I will start and let Matt clarify where I'm gonna mess it up. It hasn't yet been, I mean, the contract hasn't yet been awarded, so
Right.
that's part of the discussion that, you know, has to sort of be finalized. I'm putting April, May as sort of a little bit soft in terms of a timeline, but that is generally where we're trying to target for that. Matt, do you want to clarify?
Yeah,
that?
we're looking at spring broadly. It really comes down to once we get the contracts executed and kind of get a pre-construction meeting going and scheduling. It's possible we could start in March. We just don't know yet at this point. You know, if we approve it at the end of this month, it's going to take a few weeks probably to get all the contracts, insurance, and all the other stuff planned out.
Okay.
So end of March is possible, but it's more likely that it would probably be that early April or something like that. Other weather factors might come into play that you couldn't necessarily foresee at this point.
Well, and just to let everyone, so they're aware, there's a lot of projects in that time frame that Public Works and Water, from the standpipe repainting to well number 5 to these membranes that are pretty significant material projects. So that's why I'm trying to be a little bit generous on the time frame until that gets nailed down, because we need to be thoughtful as we develop budgets and timelines for those.
Well, if we do get the contracts in early April, how long will this project take before it's completed?
This portion, the drilling portion, is approximately 4 months or so, 5 months possibly. And then, as Trustee Allen mentioned, there's going to be a third and final component, which we haven't gone out to bid. We'll be going out to bid late spring, early summer with that. That is for the well equipment and the electrical equipment, as well as the pump that goes down there. And we talked a little bit at the Plan Commission, with Director Scott earlier, about the building that would go on site. That would all occur late summer, sometime in the fall.
So the well will be up and operated at best case scenario
The goal is to
early
have it.
fall?
The goal is to have it by the end of this year up and operational. It would be late this year.
But that's also the transmission main going to the plant too.
That's included in that.
Yes, so that is the other one that's out to bid right now. That would occur concurrently with the well drilling through the spring and the summer. They don't really impact each other directly until there's the final connection point right there in the park.
And I have a question about the
Sure.
membranes. Is there any disruption of service at all with that replacement process, and/or any change in the quality of the water?
Yeah, that's a great question. We spent a lot of time both on, and sorry, I should have mentioned that, both on that as well as the communication plan. We think the disruption in service will be more noticeable with the standpipe repainting,
Okay.
particularly in the Springdale area. And what staff, one of the mitigating factors that staff wanted to do was to do all the hydrant exercising or flushing to try to get as much sediment out before we go into the standpipe repainting, because that has to, all the water in that has to be completely drained, and so there'll be some differences in pressure throughout the system. In terms of the plant itself and cleaning membranes and drilling basically a several hundred feet tube down into the aquifer, that will create some disturbance, but they go through a very rigorous process to kind of flush that out before they would bring that into the plant. And the 2 wells, well number 3 and well number 4, although they're drawing from the same aquifer, how it was explained to me is there's different ribbons or fingers of the aquifer. So while there might be some disturbance in the aquifer that we're tapping into, or the portion of the aquifer we're tapping into, the parts where well number 3 and well number 4 are drawing for are not expected to be impacted. So it's a great question. We should not notice a difference in the water quality from the water treatment plant projects, the various projects, both well number 5 and the membrane replacements. But we do think we will notice some when we take down the standpipe over by South Campus.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Trustee Allen? Thank you for that report.
You're welcome.
Moving on to Properties and Rec, Trustee Hanson.
Thank you, President Gallagher. The first item in our packets is the capital summary report.
And there's just a few items on it. The East Train platform, basically no update on that. There are a few punch list items that will be completed in spring, mainly landscaping things. Second item on that report is the Wolf Road bike path, and engineering work is continuing on this project. We have done an impact assessment for the removal of trees, has been completed, and it may be expensive to remove these trees. And so the staff is working with the Forest Preserve District of Cook County to see if the impact fees can be waived. So fingers crossed that that will happen. And the last item on the capital summary report is the Flag Creek Greenway, which is the greenway that would be built from Plainfield Road north to either 55th Street or a little bit further north to 54th and Fair Elms. And there's a meeting about this project next Tuesday night, February 19th at 6 p.m. here, and we're inviting all residents who have interest in this project to attend this meeting. So I invite you all to be there. The next item on the agenda is the Recreation Center office redesign. As you know, Director Alden is retiring in April, and so we've added an extra position now. He's actually done the work of 2 people, so we are adding an athletic director, and in order to do that, well, not in order to do that, but it is desirable for the new athletic director, whoever is hired, to have an office at the rec center. So the bids were open. In your packet, you can see the blueprints and everything. The bids were open last Monday, February 4th, for this project. And unfortunately, only $20,000 had been budgeted because we figured it's a small project, but that's sort of shooting us in the foot because it is a small project. The actual bid came in from Construction Solutions of Allsip for $49,723, which is significantly over the $20,000 that had been budgeted. Jamie Zora is from 845 Design. She's an architect, and she does believe these are fair prices. The village always is obligated to pay the prevailing wage, which raises the price. And again, as I say, it's not a huge project, so construction companies they have to cover their cost. Director Alden did identify 3 line item budget items that can be deferred to make up for this difference in the cost. The first one would be replacing the bowed walls, which are in the rec center. There were 3 of them, and it cost $12,000 to replace them, but this is the 3rd one, and it's not in that bad of condition. It can wait another year. And then there's $8,000 in general building improvements that were not earmarked for any specific projects, so that money can be used toward it. And then there's a $7,500 savings on gym floor cleaning. And Director Alden, is that having a company come in and clean the floor? Or I'm thinking, why is it so expensive to wash a floor?
No, that's a machine.
Okay. And so you only will need to do that once.
We budgeted for 2, but we only need 1.
We only need 1. Okay. So that's a cost savings of $27,500. And then Director Alden is confident that the remaining $2,223 can be squeezed out from the budget to do this expansion project for the office. And so we recommend that the project be approved and move forward so that we can get this going, as we are going to be having a need for it come May. So again, the company is Construction Solutions from Allsip, Illinois. Okay. The next item on the agenda is also just sort of a status update. As you know, Music Makers has moved out of the Grand Avenue Center, and so that has opened up some rooms to be used for by the community. And one group that is very interested in using some of the rooms is C-Spar, and they would like to build a sensory room in the lower level of the Grand Avenue Center. And Matt Corso from C-Spar gave a very thorough presentation last week to the Recreation Commission and is very excited about building a sensory room. A sensory room is a room where children with special needs can experience different sensory projects, I guess.
Right.
It was a, very interesting presentation. I'm not doing it justice the way I'm describing it, but the $60,000 cost to outfit the room would be at CSPAR's expense. There would be some improvements needed to the room before CSPAR can even put their equipment in, such as a new floor and painting maybe, and electrical outlets and adding a door. And we do not have cost estimates on that yet, but that is something that the village would have to, bear the cost. And other tenants that are interested in additional space at the Grand Avenue Center are the Tower Corral would like to have another room. They have been a part of it used to be called the Grand Avenue Community Center. It was the Western Springs Community Center Association. They have been renting the gym every Monday night for many years, 32 years, and they pay $25 every Monday night to use the gym, and they also have a small storage room off of the gym, and now they would like to have a little bit more room for storage space. And the Historical Society also has requested additional space in Grand Avenue, so hopefully we will be able to give them extra space. Grand Avenue Preschool is currently renting a room as an additional office, but that is only through June. And then CSPAR is going to use another room on the second floor in June and July for a summer camp, I believe for older kids, and that will be there. And then the Recreation Department is looking at additional program space as well. So there are some rooms that can be combined for larger, more programmable classroom space. But it's just a status update that we are working on, utilizing the building to the best that we can, and to have revenue coming in for that building. So
Trustee Hanson, are these different options competing against each other in space, or could they be all accommodated?
they can most likely all be accommodated.
Okay,
No, they're
right.
not competing. No.
Understood. Okay,
no,
thanks.
yes.
I did want to clarify,
what?
if
Sure.
I could, that CSPAR most likely would not be a rent-paying entity. The CSPAR is the regional recreation organization that services kids with special needs that we are members of, along with many other communities. They have one of these sensory rooms in Lyle right now that I think they built about 5 years ago or so, and it truly is phenomenal. But Lyle granted them that space. I think Lyle also built the space for them. It's not clear yet how that would happen here, whether we would do it or whether CSPAR would do it. That's still it's part of the negotiation, but
Right.
I just wanted to be clear that they would not be a rent-paying entity at Grand Avenue.
Right. I should have said that. Yes, that's
No.
a good point. Okay, and then the next item is the landscaping bid tabulation. These bids were open on Thursday, January 24th, and the bids are in your packet. The lowest bidder for the landscaping services was NCA Property Group at a total bid of $34,784. However, upon reviewing their references, it was determined that they really are not, they do not have the required relevant experience for a contract of this size and scope. We asked for a minimum of 5 references for jobs, and the references provided did not meet the specifications. So the staff and Attorney Jerusik have recommended that the village board reject all bids for the 2019 landscaping services contract, and this will allow the staff to contact the remaining bidders and procure individual proposals for the contract. They plan to recommend a proposal at the last board meeting in February, and $50,000 has been budgeted for landscaping maintenance in 2019. So that would be on the omnibus to just reject all bids and basically start over.
I think it's on tonight.
Tonight, yeah, I'm sorry, yes, yes. And then at the next meeting, we will be having new bids, correct?
Right.
Right, okay.
So the bid participants that are listed in the packet, those are the ones, that's everyone who responded, or?
Yes.
So did the incumbent not,
Brightview Landscape is the incumbent.
that's, okay, all
There.
right.
Yeah. Some of these companies changed their names and everything too.
Yeah, they were a different company.
Weren't they a
were
different
merged.
company before? Yeah.
Yeah.
Bridgman, I think.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so yes, and you see the bids in your packet there.
Yes.
Okay. The next item is the HVAC maintenance contract, request for proposal. And this was, it allows the village to solicit proposals from individual contractors for the maintenance of all HVAC units servicing the municipal buildings. This process does not require the lowest proposal that be awarded the bid. Instead, it's the staff can select a contractor based on their proposed maintenance plan. And as you see in your bid, there were, I think, 8, I'm not counting really quickly, people who bid, companies who bid on this. And after reviewing all the proposals, the staff recommends awarding the HVAC maintenance contract to the YMI Group, pending reference checks. Have those been completed?
Yes, they have.
Okay, and so you're still comfortable going with YMI?
Correct.
Okay, and the annual cost would be $19,900. They did also submit the lowest time and materials labor cost of $110 an hour. So that
Okay.
is the recommendation.
And that we will put on the omnibus.
That will go on the omnibus. Okay, and that concludes my report.
Thank you, Trustee Hansen. Yes,
Yeah.
Trustee Allen?
Thank you. I had a couple of questions, Trustee Hansen.
Okay.
On the C-SPAR,
Mhm.
the memo in our packet from February 7th, just so I'm clear, there is talk of a 15 to 30-year lease, but there would be a no-cost lease.
Right.
Okay, but the 60,000 that's estimated to build a sensory room, which sounds like kind of a neat concept, they would cover
Yes.
that. Okay. And then my only other question, do we have any sense on that building? Like, are there any big capital maintenance needs in the future? And I guess where I'm going with that, what obligation would we have as of a village if we're signing a 15 to 30-year lease, if for some reason, you know, the cost to maintain that building starts to get excessive?
Want me to comment on the condition of the building? It's in very good shape. We have, Trustee Allen, we put, every year, a lot of capital improvements into the building, you know, roofs, it's new HVAC, it's new plumbing. The building is solid as a rock, because it's stone. It's very, and we put in new windows. So the building has been improved continually over the years, and it's in a very good condition right now. I would think it will continue to stay in good condition with, you know, basic maintenance. It has like 7 roofs on that building, and every year there's some roof work that has to get done. But otherwise, structurally, there's not much that needs to be done in that building. We've fixed everything up, and you know, but
I just want,
looking.
I think,
Go ahead.
Director Alden, if you could please comment on the room where the C-SPAR is planning to have it. It's in the basement, correct?
Yes, the Chestnut.
Good
Room.
point.
And that's where
yes.
we really don't have a lot of people that rent in that area. That's not a desirable space for
Right.
them, but for C-SPAR it is.
And
Is
there's an
that-
elevator already in place that, you know,
Yes, it's fully ADA accessible. Is that what your question was, Trustee Allen, about the
It was
space
just
itself?
more
or-
in general, if we're making that commitment, and, you know, things like elevators and roofs and electrical, we just heard $200,000 for fire protection. You know, if at some point down the road, a future board would want to make a different decision on that property, what obligation would we have to C-SPAR by signing a relatively long commitment? Because they're making a big investment in the area, so it's just, that was my concern.
Maybe it would make sense to tie the lease to the normal sort of usable lifespan of the room itself. I mean, if the materials in the product, in the room were to wear out, maybe that would be a time when they could determine if they want to recommit too.
And
That's a good point.
You may not know the answer to this, but the materials that they are putting in for the sensory experiences, those are removable, correct? If they did decide they wanted to take it elsewhere or whatever, they could most likely take that equipment out, have it
Correct.
removed, and used elsewhere.
As you know from the presentation, Trustee Hansen, and I know President Gallagher saw the one in Lyle as well, and was at the presentation as well. They are, like, there's a chair, and there's a bubble maker, and there's a sound board, and then there's a thing on the floor. So these are different events, different features. They're all separate, that are strategically placed in the room. Little climbing apparatus. So yes, they could be easily removed. They're not permanently attached or anything like that. The only thing, I think was mentioned earlier, was the floor.
Right,
They require a little different floor than the concrete floor that's in there now.
right.
Maybe Attorney Drusik, do you have any comments on the long-term issue?
Yeah, what we'll do is we'll look at, you know, what type of lease they have in these other communities, and then we'll bring that back. And things that what we've discussed with staff are items you've talked about. Who's going to own the equipment? They'll own the equipment. They should secure the room and be responsible for, making sure that there's proper, locks on the door, monitoring use of the room, indemnification. Somebody gets hurt in the room, that's going to be on them. So we will make sure that the lease is fair to both parties, but that the lease reflects the fact that this is CSPAR's room, equipment, fixtures, and if the lease expires, at the end of the term or early, it's their obligation to, to remove what they can remove if they're going to reuse it or relocate it. And that the village doesn't incur any additional maintenance or liability costs for its existence and its operation. So
And
we'll look at that and address that when it comes back.
And I do know that there is an elevator down to the lower level, and I know there is a washroom down there, but would we be obligated to have an ADA compliant washroom down there?
It's too early. There is a bathroom down there, and it is not ADA compliant. So we would have, that might be a phase 2. I think in some memo I mentioned it as a phase 2 project.
That's what I thought,
but right now it's, it's down there, and it is what it is. So if CSPAR, that could be part of a negotiation as well. Who's responsible for making it ADA compliant?
Okay.
And we will look at that issue in relation to, we have ADA compliant bathrooms on the first floor
Yes.
in that facility, and whether that's adequate to comply with the Illinois Accessibility Code and the ADA regulations. Does every bathroom have to be compliant, or do we have to just provide a bathroom accessible to the public? So we'll have
Right. Good point.
staff and Bennis can look at that and give an opinion.
Okay. Thank
And
you.
that concludes my report.
Thank you, Trustee Hansen. Moving on to the Finance Committee, Trustee Rudolph.
Thank you, President Gallagher. The Finance Committee has a shorter agenda than those who came before me. In your packet, there was a memo for a budget amendment, for from Director Supert with respect to flagging services that were performed by the BNSF. And the services themselves, you'll note in his memo, they have already been completed in 2017 and 2018. This was really kind of an invoice discrepancy reconciliation process. But as a result, we will be looking at a budget amendment request of $80,000 that we would then put on the omnibus. But I'm going to defer to Director Supert to just give a little bit of background on why we're looking at these invoices now, rather than paying them in 2017 and 2018. And I know, Trustee Allen, you had a question about where they were previously budgeted and whether we had brought that forward.
Yeah, so as part of BNSF's work for the train platform, there was a number of things they needed completed under their scope. And this was budgeted underneath the project scope. They needed to relocate some of the signal lines and communications they have at Wolf Road and at Lawn for their signalization equipment. Their initial contract so the village initially contracted with a contractor called Rail Pros. This included the flagging service. After we did that, about 2 months into the project, the BNSF stated they would like to do that work in-house. So they rescinded the Rail Pros contract, and we executed the sports account work agreement with BNSF. Long story short, as the project, you guys know the issues we had with the project with the weather and soils and all the other issues that occurred out there. The village received various BNSF invoices through the end of 2017 and through 2018. Part of our review of the project, our project engineer from James J. Bennis and Associated noted a number of discrepancies on those invoices. We initiated conversations with BN to try to reconcile those discrepancies. They did not respond, so we did partial payments of those invoices at that time. It wasn't until about last fall when the BNSF came back around to try and reconcile those invoices. So we completed that. We did get satisfactory answers to a lot of that work. There was actually a decrease even after those reconciliations on most of the invoices, which I noted in my memo. But we didn't, because of the partial invoices, we didn't carry forward any of the funds because we didn't know what those funds were going to be because there was no response from the BN. So what we're trying to do is basically clean that all up now that we have the final tally for those invoices and get that all paid out.
So, thank you, Trustee Rudolph. I just had a couple follow-up questions.
Yeah.
That was a great overview, Matt. And also kudos, and I know he's on here, Jeff, but for dogging those invoices and save the village about 10% on some of the issues with them. I guess what concerned me in looking at this, the term force account work agreement and compelling us to use BNSF significantly more than what our original contract was for. Some of the multiple issues that the engineers uncovered. So it raised really two questions. One, do we have a pretty good sense, will IDOT actually cover these when they get resubmitted to them?
Yeah, we believe IDOT will cover the additional costs. The scope of the work was included as part of the original IDOT reimbursement, so we have submitted for the additional work that was required as part of that. We don't have a response or confirmation from IDOT yet, but the scope was included as part of the project.
Okay, and then the only other thing is, with the tollway expansion and their Shoe Fly Bridge and everything, they just pushed additional costs onto us, and I think they may have been in some parts responsible for some of the delays as well too, with the restrictions on when work could be there. This is something we're thinking about when we're negotiating impact fees with them. It feels like this is causing us a little bit of pain to go through, and again, kudos to staff for monitoring this so closely. That's all. Thank you.
So this will be on the omnibus then.
Okay.
And no further report. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to public health and safety, Trustee Sifferman's not here. Trustee Allen?
Yes, I had two comments, or two items, and I'm going to dispense with the first one, but allow, if I may, then I know some residents may want to talk about the proposed traffic changes on Chestnut. So I'll start with the first one, which is in your packet. This is the police department doing a Buckle Up Valentine safety check for residents, and actually for non-residents as well too, to just make sure that your baby car seats are installed properly, fastened correctly. Two of our officers are actually going to have gone through training on how to do this, and one of the things that I found interesting is that you may think you're actually buckling correctly, whether the child should be front-facing or back-facing, where in the rear seat to put them. That in a lot of cases they aren't buckled properly. So if you have a chance, it's in connection with Valentine's Day, although it is on this coming Saturday, from 7:30 to 9:30, the police department will inspect how you've buckled in your child. It's free, no cost. They are recommending that if you want to, you can also ask questions of the two specially trained police officers, and their emails will be put out there. But it'll be right here between the Village Hall and the police department in this sort of parking lot area. I don't know, Chief Buds, did you have anything else you wanted to add to that?
I can't add, you really nailed it out of the park. We're looking forward to a good turnout. We traditionally have good turnouts with this. And like you said, residents are encouraged, if they just don't want to come to this or they can't, email questions. And if it's not up to this day, they can email questions to those two texts at any time of the year, and we'll try to answer those for you.
Okay.
And so we're looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Buds. The second item is the proposed parking restriction improvements on Chestnut. And I'll give, again, similar to what we just did with Ridge Road Oaks, I'll give an overview, and then residents who want to come and talk, feel free. On our desk was a map of this section of the town. It was done by the police department. And just to back up a little bit, a meaningful number of residents looked at the situation on Chestnut. It is a crosswalk to get to Laidlaw School, and felt that it throws an unsafe condition. There actually had been one accident there previously, and several new misses. So they got a meaningful number of signatures and presented it. It went through the normal channels to the Transportation and Safety Commission, to review. There were some differences of opinions on how best to address the safety concern, although all sides did agree that there is a safety concern. The commission heard testimony. They did a traffic study that's again in our packet, and you can look at the map that shows Chestnut does have restricted parking moving west from Wolf Road, from Lawn all the way to Grove, but there's no restricted parking currently between Grove and Forest, which was the area in question. So the Transportation and Safety Commission did vote 3-1 to move it forward to Health and Safety. We did discuss this at Health and Safety, and some residents came and spoke again. Again, there were some differences of opinion. I guess this is now my interpretation. This may not be the ultimate final solution, but putting in a no parking on the north side for this one block did seem to have, kind of a preponderance of feeling that that would improve safety in the area. So we recommended to move it forward to the full board, and that's sort of kind of the backstory, but love to hear from some of our residents that I think are here tonight
Yes.
with it.
Oh, sorry.
Go, I was just gonna say, but the south side of the streets of Chestnut still has unrestricted parking, correct?
Correct.
Completely unrestricted, okay, go
And would
ahead.
this be no parking at any time, or would this be during school hours, or?
Yeah, Chief Buds can correct me, but it'd be complete 24/7, no parking, consistent with what we have on the blue line on our diagrams. And I have a couple extra maps here as well too. So it would be consistent, no parking 24/7 on the north side, then all the way from Lawn all the way to Forest.
Okay.
And that actually was a consideration because there was a precedent for it.
Mhm.
And again, that may not be the best solution, but that was what was requested by the residents to the commission, and it did have a consistency approach. And I should say these, no parking restriction sites would require an amendment to our ordinance, and it's a relatively easy thing for staff to put in. Versus putting in a stop sign, which requires a lot more compliance type issues to make sure that it meets a safety standard.
Okay. So, would anyone like to address the board? Please state your name.
Good evening.
Good
My name
evening.
is Lisa Van Basten, 1312 Walker Street. As a former Western Springs Village trustee and a lifelong resident, I appreciate all the decisions that you need to make in these meetings, and especially when you have conflicting perspectives from the residents, and I know that's the case here. My husband and I frequently walk our dogs through the intersection of Chestnut and Prospect, as we live 2 blocks away, and we've lived there for over 30 years. I heard of the request for the parking restrictions at this location after both the Transportation and Safety Commission and the Public Health and Safety meeting. So I am not aware of what the conversations were at those meetings, especially because the meeting minutes are not yet available on the website either. Anyway, I think we all agree that safety of all residents is of our utmost concern, and I understand that and I appreciate that. On the other hand, I was glad to hear that earlier Trustee Allen spoke of concerns on setting precedent when he was talking about the costs and sidewalks. Because my main concern is that I feel like this kind of parking restriction is setting a precedent for future safety concerns in the village. I'm unclear why the commission is recommending a parking restriction by some residents' homes first, rather than pursuing other more traditional safety solutions. For example, recently, November and December, there was discussion and implementation of one of those portable pedestrian yellow signs at Hillgrove and Central. That was instituted without much conflict, and that is a much busier intersection than this is. So I think, in fact, to give some other examples, many more pedestrians cross at Prospect and Hillgrove. Not Prospect and Chestnut, but Prospect and Hillgrove, by the pool, yet parking is allowed by that crosswalk. So again, I'm concerned about the precedent that this decision might be instituting. The impression I have, and this is secondhand admittedly, was that there's one particular household that was concerned about safety, and they requested the restriction in front of many other residents' homes for this entire block. When people on this block bought that property, they had the expectation that they could park in front of their home, okay, when they bought the property for that whole block. So really, you are interfering with the enjoyment of those property owners for what their expectation was when they purchased that property. Okay, now, for example, I live across from a pool. I have an expectation that my personal enjoyment may be inhibited because of the pool, but I knew that when I bought the property. These people are on a residential street, residential intersection. They would have no expectation that this would happen to them. Children have crossed at Chestnut and Prospect to go to Laidlaw and McClure for well over 40 years with this current configuration. Interestingly, there's no crosswalk markings at either of the crosswalks that cross Chestnut at Prospect. So we don't even have the markings for crosswalk, but yet we're taking this extreme step to prohibit parking there. A marked crosswalk with the portable yellow sign would be a traditional safety solution, and it would not be setting a new precedent. If safety is a concern for the school children, I presume that before this was enacted or presented, that both Laidlaw and McClure were made aware of this concern. For example, we know we have great schools here. They must be teaching children how to safely cross these intersections. Were they approached? I don't know. If this intersection is so heavily traveled by students, maybe student or paid crossing guards are warranted. Again, it's been this way for 40 plus years, which is as long as I've been aware of this intersection, and it hasn't been a problem. Another option going through the school district would be to set up a walking buddy system, have older children escort younger children to school. And that would also, there's so many other benefits to having a younger child and older child buddy together. So was that a consideration? There's so many different options other than impacting people's property values and in their enjoyment of their property than parking restriction on the whole block. So I hope that these and similar ideas were pursued before taking the step to completely restrict parking on this block. It never had parking restrictions before, and I think that care should also be taken when a village enacts a precedent that can negatively affect your property values and the enjoyment of the property, as this action is likely to do. Not just the residents on that side of the block, but now you're asking that the residents on the other side of the block have to endure parking from the people on the other side of the street. So it's not just one side that's affected, it's really both sides. Please think carefully about the precedent you will be setting by authorizing this parking restriction without pursuing any other traditional safety solutions first. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address the board this evening?
Sure. I guess would you like me to address the issue or address her issues, or how should is the best way to? I guess I'd hand that out, and that's kind of what the issue was. And the Traffic Safety Commission, we voted to approve this. And I guess the issue is, long story short.
Sir, I'm sorry. Could you state your name, please?
My name is Tom Salvino. I live at
Thank you.
4307 Prospect Avenue. The issue is that basically Chestnut is, Mr. Allen mentioned earlier, is no parking on the north side, all the way from the library, all the way there. It ends right where there's a crosswalk where these kids basically come out of Laidlaw. If they come south, they have to cross there. So, or certainly the kids that live in our area do. And it was signed by people that live on that block, live on the block that we're talking about, live on the south side of the block. And the issue is these kids can't see. So it's not a question of, ultimately it's about safety. It's about these children cannot see. If there's a car on the north side and the south side, as you can see in that photo, they try to stand there and look, and they can't see around the car, and they're jetting out into the street. This all started because 4 months ago, somebody came to my house and said, your child who's 7 years old and got hit by a car, and she's about this tall, and she was standing there and ultimately couldn't see, and this has happened about 4 times where, so we all go out and try to cross her. But there's other kids that are not my children that cannot see. I don't know who's, ultimately no one's crossing them, and it's an issue. So the Traffic and Safety Commission approved that it should be consistent, that it's one side parking, which is the south side. The 2 people were there at the meeting that were opposed to it. Ultimately, one person said, yeah, it makes sense, it's consistent, we're going to do it all the way. So the Traffic and Safety Commission said, you agree? He said, yes, I agree, it should be this way. So they said, okay, he agrees. And the one person that's parking their car said, you had the traffic and safety said, could you park on the south side, move your car 10 feet to the south side? And the person said yes. So the traffic and safety said, we're all in agreement that it should be safer for the kids to be able to see. Ultimately, as you can see, they can't see today. So ultimately, it's about safety of these children. It's about safety of seeing, having a visual that they cannot see when there's parks on the north side and the south side. It's the only place you can park on the north and the south, so it'll be consistent. It's only on one side. It's not perfect. They still can't see perfectly, but at least you can see somewhat if there's cars on one side, not both sides. And actually, people that live on the north side sign that. The Pogues and the heirs and the people who actually their parking is going to be in front of their house are the stand rings, and they're for it because they want the kid to be safe. So that's what it's about.
I'm the one to add a few other things. My name's Tim Newkirk. I'm at 4313 Prospect. So I walk my kids to school every day, 6 and 8 years old. The reason Tom is here is because he had a close call with his daughter. So what I've noticed, and you know, I think we all have to bear in mind that Western Springs isn't the same place it was 40 years ago. So we have a lot of traffic on Chestnut. The last stop sign is what, Central? So you have like 3 or 4 blocks where cars pick up a high rate of speed traveling on Chestnut, either east or west. And they kind of blow through this T intersection. So got a lot of little kids walking across that to get to school. And Chief Buzz, I think, mentioned that stop signs really aren't recommended for slowing cars down. So that doesn't seem to be an option. But we're all in agreement here, both sides, that this is a safety concern. So we just felt it prudent that we bring it to your attention. And, you know, I've witnessed it firsthand, a lot of cars zipping to school in the morning, so it's a concern.
So anyway, that was the traffic and safety commission approved it. And personally, there were probably 15 residents here saying it before. There were 2 ultimately saying they were against it, and ultimately at the end of the meeting, again, one person said it was against it, said it makes sense, and we're going to consistent and have it. So they said he agreed it should be no parking on the north side. And the other person said it was against it. Ultimately asked them, is there one child that was a 25-year-old? Can you park your car on the other side? They said yes. We all said we're all in agreement. This is the way it should be. So, and ultimately the goal was to slow people down. That's the second goal, which I think the sign may or not, or something in the middle of the street, but something in the middle of the street does not prevent little kids who are 3 feet tall still cannot see when there's a car parked in the north. Park on the south, they still can't see, and then they're darting across the street. That's why it was approved.
Well, so that's, I guess that's my question, was back to the concept of a crosswalk. I mean, where you would back the cars off of the crosswalk as well. So I mean, there would be some space where the cars could park, or how close they could be to the crosswalk. Was that considered or discussed?
We did discuss it at the first meeting, the traffic and safety, and ultimately, if you look at the picture, there's still a situation where kids can't, little kids can't see. Look at the picture, even if they're backed off 10 feet, they're still looking out there and they're darting across. The ones that's the issue is. And ultimately, there's a benefit of having consistent north side of Chestnut, no parking, where people can see the whole way down.
My question is, if you move all the parking to the south side of Chestnut, so the when they're walking one way, they'll be able to see clearly and everything. But then coming back, now you've got more cars on that side of the street. Correct?
Now you have both though. Today you have both north and south. So sorry. So yes, I mean it's not ideal.
Okay.
Ideal would be no park on either side for these little kids. But at least when there's, I guess the real issue becomes when there's a car on the north and the car on the south, both sides.
Okay, that's
little
what
kids
the
are
problem.
like they can't see at all. So
Okay.
yes, to be perfect, there's no cars, but at least one side there's some vision for these children. Ultimately, if there's a car on both sides, literally if you stand there, they're darting back and forth. They can't see at all because they're 2 feet tall.
Right.
So at least it makes it better.
There's a considerable amount of traffic in the morning too. Most people exiting, the highway will take Hampton to Chestnut, and vice versa. If people are dropping their kids off to school, they'll zip through that. So cars are moving pretty fast. Cars are moving pretty fast. I think everybody's on their cell phones too. So it's just distracted drivers.
People are circling Laidlaw. That's how they're dropping off. So it's a constant circle around that block of cars. And that's kind of why at least there was some vision. That was the thought of making it safer.
And Chief Kenny, have you ever had an issue like with the fire department, if there's cars parked on both sides of the streets? I know, I live in Springdale, and I do know that when there are cars parked on both sides of the streets in Springdale, it's tight. I mean, you know, so that's, I'm just wondering.
There are definitely parts of the village in various locations where when we go through, especially with the engine or with the ladder truck, where it hampers and we've got to be very careful in terms of how tight it is. No question about that.
But this was what we brought up in the Traffic and Safety Committee. And it basically speaks to the fact that if you look at this, I'm sorry, I'm looking at this. Okay, problem. So the issue becomes, there's a car here on the north, these kids are trying to cross, they can't see. But the other issue became, to your point, when the LT school bus in the morning tries to turn here and there's cars here, it can't turn. So it sits here and waits, and the kids are trying to run, so the bus can't turn. And then in the evening, the LT bus tries to take a left, and it can't take a left. So the point is, there's three issues here. One is the kids can't see, the bus can't turn, and then the cars coming from the north down to Chestnut, they turn here, there's cars here, they have to wait here. So it's a completely congested spot right here. And so the issue will become getting rid of these cars on the north side. You're still gonna park on the south side, which is still not perfect, but at least these kids can see and the bus can turn. And that's the LT bus. In the morning and the evening, cannot get through here.
So back to, I guess, to my original question about when this would be in effect. So I understand consistency is nice, but everything you're describing is being driven by school, buses, kids walking. So why not consider a school zone, no parking
So the issue
approach?
that came up in the Traffic and Safety Commission meeting, and the issue became the pool. In the afternoons and evenings, kids are coming from the north to the pool, and they, again, if it's 4:30 in the afternoon or whatever it is, they can't see. So to be consistent with the street, it was no parking because summertime evenings, the pool for little kids, and that's another topic which we bring up next, but the pool is a big issue. People coming north are crossing here, so it's 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and little kids can't see.
But wouldn't there be other streets that are impacted by the pool? This I take the point about the school,
This is
everything.
somewhat unique because there's not a stop sign for
Right.
about 4 blocks. So you have
yeah.
cars going through this intersection at a higher rate of speed than they do at Walnut or Oak or any of the
Okay.
other east-west streets.
Okay. I take your point too about them, people exiting at Hampton and then going down there. I mean, just Google Maps routes people
It's all
off
local.
of.
It's local.
This is a very, very busy corner all day long. And so the point was less cars parked are better. And talk about precedents, I think there should be a precedent. You shouldn't have parking both sides of the street where little children are all day long. So that's,
Well-
if safety is the issue, I think that's why we're here, is for safety of your kids.
Thank you for that visual, because to me it illustrates how the north side of the street is the more dangerous one for kids to cross, because when you're going from the south to the north and traffic is coming from the west, you have the intersection to look and you're not really hidden by any cars. So cars can see you, you can see cars. But when you're coming south and cars are coming from the east, and there's that car parked, then the pedestrian is hidden, and, you know,
Right, they can't see.
they
the
can't
kids.
see the
Kids are
kids, and the
darting right in
kids
front of
can't see the
cars.
cars. So,
To follow up on one of Lisa's comments, Chief Buds, did we talk with the school to get their view on the parking there on Chestnut?
Not directly with this, but we have, and we typically communicate with the schools when we finalize our traffic flow plan, and Laidlaw's been the same for several years, and we brought this up at the various commission and committee meetings as well, is that it's the police departments and the school districts recommended crossing is actually Forest and Chestnut, which is marked on the road. But of course, Prospect is available to cross as well. It's improved with the, the sidewalks and whatnot. And that's typically the communication we have with the school on an ongoing basis. This in particular has not, because Chestnut's not really part of Maple and by the school there, but I can't confirm that Forest is the recommended crossing. The traffic plan and pedestrian plan.
Ms. Van Basten, did you have something to say?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would like to take the podium, please. Sure. Okay, first thing I want to question is this idea that the bus cannot cross. I have 4 copies of this. I did, okay. If you look at the intersection, and I use Google Maps, which is pretty easy to copy from, you can see that buses can certainly cross there. We walk our dogs most mornings, at least in decent weather, right by the intersection when the bus is coming. And the bus can certainly turn there without issue. That's a wide street. So I question this idea that the bus can't get by. The other thing I question is this idea, just for some of you, I know you aren't in the neighborhood, the idea that parents are circling by that intersection all the time. Laidlaw is bordered by Forest and Hampton, not Grove. So why would they go by Chestnut and Grove when the school is by Forest and Hampton, a block west of there? It just doesn't make sense. So I just want to make sure you guys all have your facts. And again, I would say that other alternatives like a marked crosswalk and the yellow signs that you guys have been putting up elsewhere would be a good step in the right direction.
Okay.
Do we know why Chestnut was currently no parking for I don't know how long, up till Grove in the past?
Why did they stop there initially?
Yeah, why did they stop there initially? And
Someone said it's because of the church.
Oh, Congo,
Yeah, the Congo church there. I don't know, Chief, do you have a
Yeah,
comment?
it's our belief that makes sense. It controls parking, especially on Sundays, from Grand all the way to Grove, to control that parking, and sometimes they have events on Saturdays. I never confirmed that with the archives. It's been that signage for as long as I can remember, but that makes sense of why it would be that way.
Okay. Thank you.
I would just say the biggest issue in the traffic issue, we talked about the bus, which is not the biggest issue. The biggest issue is visual. It's these little kids who are 5, 6, 7 years old that walk up to the corner, there's a car on this side, a car on that side, and they can't see. So that is, ultimately that's the issue, is the safety of these little children who are darting back and forth. And again, my kids have been picked up 3 times, and Tim's children also, and it's all the people that live on the south side of Chestnut are having this issue. So it was thought that it's safer for the children, it's consistent on Chestnut, there's no parking there. And ultimately, the people that live there, 2 people signed the petition to approve it, the 2 people that didn't like it, again, one person said, I get it, it should be consistent on the north side. So they all laughed and said, you're now for it? And they said, yes, I'm for it. So that was one person. And the other person, they just said, traffic and safety said, can you park your car from the north side to the south side? And the person said, yes. So we said, we're all in agreement that this is an easy fix, that the person, there's one car that's that red car, moves to the south side, that's the car in the picture, moves from the north side, moves 10 feet from the north side to the south side. And basically, there's no other cars there generally, other than work cars, et cetera. So ultimately, it's basically the vision of these children that are going back and forth that are all can't see.
Right,
That's
thank
what's
you.
involved.
Thank you for your comments. Appreciate you all coming out and addressing the board.
But just so I know, there's 4 homes on the north side of Chestnut between Grove and Forest?
Chief Ido.
This
4 homes? Yeah, they're just 4 homes?
I don't know.
On that block?
Yeah.
I can go look.
It's probably 4 to 6 maybe. I mean,
There
it's-
are 5.
Five, yeah.
One's empty, one's for sale, it's empty. So 2 people were for it, 2 people were against it.
And then
2
you- right.
ultimately we talked about this. So 2 people signed it, yes, and agreed. One house is completely empty, and the 2 people that we talked about that were against it, we talked about, one said, I'll move my car, one person said it should be consistent. So it was basically, we're all in agreement. They'll live there.
Precedent. Okay, you're setting a precedent for safety concerns and taking parking privileges away from.
I'm sorry, I need you guys to approach. Thank you.
Okay, I repeat that you are establishing a precedent for all future boards, for all future transportation and safety commissions, for public and safety committees, that they will have a hard time retracting from. Okay, if you do something other than the traditional. If you look at the photo from Google Maps, I don't think 2 cars could park adjacent to either side crosswalk, which is what's being described elsewhere here. So I have a hard time believing that the children can't look around because between the 2 crosswalks, there's a driveway and there's a lot of open space. You know, there's not enough space to park a car, I don't think. So I think there's adequate viewing.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your opinions. We appreciate it. We have the pictures, we have the data. We know where you're at.
I just
But go
wanted
ahead.
to say,
Sure.
We're here because this is something that's happening.
Right.
We've had close calls. I mean, we're not here for any other reason than we've had some experiences at this intersection that warrant a change. So, whatever precedent we're talking about here we're all in agreement that there's a safety concern here, and that needs to be addressed.
Right.
The issue we, the first traffic and safety meeting was 15 residents were here, and they all had little kids. We probably had 15 little kids and 15 parents, and they're all saying the same thing, which this is a dangerous intersection. So again, we're here, this is the third meeting I've been to, and probably, this has been a lot of our time and energy. And I'll say this, if there's a precedence here, God bless, that this is about the safety of children. That's what it's about. Should be if that's the precedence that the kids can't see in a certain area, then we make a precedence that they're safe, and that should be the precedence for what we make. And by the way, if it's near the pool, then wherever it is, if there's a precedence, we're saying, what's the safety for our little children? I have 5 kids, this is my last kid, so quite honestly, this is not really big to us, but ultimately whoever lives in this area or buys my house or whatever, this is a very dangerous area that should be safe for those kids. And that's a precedence, then that's a precedence should be safety for our children. So.
Thank you.
I just have a question of Chief Buds. Do you know statistically, like if you have identified a crosswalk or if you had signage, children everywhere or watch for children or, school whatever, do you know if that is proven to be an effective tool?
I could take a stab at that. I would ask my colleague, Director Super, to kind of also chime in. The TNS, Transportation and Safety Commission, and this board, by policy, has adopted the MUTCD standards, which are the, help me out on that one, Matt, the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. And part of it, we don't have a traffic engineer here today, but they have been a part of these similar conversations for different requests through the years that I've been privy to. And I believe that, and again, Matt, please correct me, that it's been proven or not recommended that those signs as advisory signs are effective and really, justified. Correct, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, you have to understand what the purpose of those signs really is meant to do. In most cases, they're meant to bring awareness to certain situations, but they are not. There's certain devices that are meant to be used at controlled intersections or at crosswalks. There's even certain devices that are, the IDOT, for example, doesn't particularly endorse, and in some cases have been removed from the MUTCD. So really, what you want to use as your guideline is what the recommendation is that's coming out from a traffic study. I haven't personally seen the traffic study that was completed as part of this particular incident, but if it did have specific recommendations that came from that, that's really what you should be using as a guideline, as what you should be looking at as to what's appropriate for this specific scenario. Because each intersection, each time we address these sorts of things, it is different every time. There's all sorts of factors that come into play that make it unique. So that's where a traffic study really gives you the guideline as to what's appropriate. And even in the MUTCD, there's descriptions in there that describe when certain things are appropriate and when they aren't, and it's more often than not that the MUTC specifically recommends that a traffic study is completed to determine what is appropriate.
Well, and even if you had signage and everything, it doesn't improve the vision for the young children who are small and can't see, yeah.
So what exactly are we discussing here this evening, whether this ends up on the omnibus to approve it or not, or are we talking about
Yes.
potentially, okay.
Because, so this went to the commission. The commission approved proposed parking restrictions on the north side of Chestnut. It went to the committee. The committee also recommended that, and so now it's before the board here for your questions and your consideration on the committee's recommendation, and then
it goes
we
on.
would vote, yeah.
And the committee made the recommendation without a traffic study, or was there an actual traffic study done?
No.
Well, there was a history, an
Yeah, there
accident
was not a
history.
formal traffic study. Trustee Timick, those are very, very expensive. And we, in preparing for our 2019 budget, staff decided to really try to limit the scope of some of our traffic studies because they had been getting a little expensive over the years, and we're a little choosier, more judicious of what we're gonna use a traffic study for. Typically, we do those for type 1 signs, stop sign request. This from Mr. Salvino's early days in November, he was strictly requesting parking restrictions, which, you know, as a matter of practice, doesn't rise to the level of a formal traffic study, which could cost thousands of dollars to do that. At direction of this board or committee, certainly we would look into that for this or other projects. We just didn't do that. Like Trustee Allen said, we did a very informal internal staff study on 5-year crash history, if any citations had been issued in that area over the course of 5 years, so on and so forth. We felt that was an effective way to kind of get it to this level for what the original request was.
Okay, thank you.
But this could be, and then Trustee Allen, as you presented earlier, this could be a first step. I mean, there may be an opportunity, or maybe we should consider a traffic study at some point in the future, but this could be a first step to try to deal with the current issue kind of as is.
That was at least my personal view. I think it's hard because I think all sides recognize that something should be done.
Okay.
I'm very sensitive to some of the comments former Trustee Benson made. And, you know, what did come before was the no parking on the north side, and that's what the commission and the committee studied. To reiterate what Chief Budd said, those MUTCD studies are really expensive. That's where you're trying to look at a stop sign. This provides a little more flexibility so that it could change in the future. Lisa is correct also that we did add that kind of portable stop sign on a different location. Maybe in the future there'd be some, you know, subset of different types of things, maybe even striping that better, painting the sidewalk would improve visibility, not the sidewalk but the street there as well too. But the commission's talked about several of those things like you know, speed bumps, and they recommended against that. So anyway, what is before us is the no parking on the north side in this 1 block area.
Is there a practical reason why you can't make it 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., maybe that whole block, all the way down Chestnut, since we're talking about, I'm hearing it was for a church and and Saturday events, but.
So, yeah, the church thing actually kind of concerned me a little bit too when I heard that, because, you know, they're gonna want, I shouldn't say it, but they may want the weekend type parking, which might be a different situation than the school type hours. Again, what was requested by the residents was no parking 24/7. And I'll have to defer on the procedural. If the board were to say, let's send it all the way back to the commission to restudy, to come up with some other types of scenarios, like a 9 to 5 type Monday through Friday, no parking restriction, I think that would be different than what the residents had requested us to look at, and would have to go all the way back to the beginning.
And practically speaking, is that something that we should even endeavor, or should we just vote on what we have?
It would have to go back to the Transportation and Safety Commission. Like, because
And then
what
make
they
its way
voted
back.
on was this.
Right.
So we'd have to vote, we have to first
Right.
vote on this,
Yeah.
and then,
And then if
Right.
we reject it, kick it back? Or
Right.
can we kick it back in advance of voting?
You could kick it back.
Correct, yep.
I'm just concerned, so I'm very sensitive to the concept of safety, so I don't want to sound cold-hearted here, but I'm almost concerned that this isn't the right solution. One, because maybe it doesn't do enough relative to the cars on the south side, but then also I think maybe it's also too punitive to a certain extent to the residents, where it's 24/7 no parking. And, you know, to former Trustee Beston's point, where do we stop? I mean, do we then start saying no parking everywhere within the several block radius of the pool, every school? I mean, what becomes reasonable? And so that's a concern to me. So maybe do we spend a little more time, do something better here, so we have a better long-term solution, and we don't set a precedent that could backfire later.
I don't disagree. I think, especially when I saw your poster board, it almost seems like we need more of a solution. Again, this is based on a conversation that I'm hearing here tonight and you're drawing versus anything more formal than that. And I appreciate that the commission and the committee have done a lot more than I have here tonight. So I respect what has been expressed, but it seems like we have a lot of issues at that intersection.
We have a lot of issues. So I guess the issue became traffic and safety actually brought up, should we do a time period? So that was brought up to Chairman Kosinovich, I believe his name. He said he thinks, so they debated that,
and it's consistent to the whole street. So then you can park on the north side, you can't park on the north side all the way at all.
Bless you.
Then it'd be confusing. This block is sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. So he said it should be consistent all the way on the north side. And then the one resident who, again, was against this said, if we're gonna do it, have it consistent. So he said, I'm for it. So that's so they debated a time frame. Kosovo said, no, it should be consistent the whole way, all the way down. So to Mr. Allen's point, this is the first step, which is visual. These are vision. Today, I ran out there today. My little girl can't see. So at least we have a visual today. And then the other person who was originally against it was a resident, Janice Hamauer, who ultimately said this makes sense. But the first step is this. But to her point, then she said, how do we slow these cars down? Because again, if you look at with that area, you have a stop sign all the way to Central. Every corner is a stop sign, and then there's no stop signs for 3 blocks. So we have this issue is you have kids can't see, and the cars are going 3 blocks without stopping. So this is kind of real. So there's probably a 2-pronged thing. Number 1 is these kids can't see, and then number 2 is how do we slow the cars down that are going 3 blocks straight ahead from the east to the west without a stop sign. So there's kind of 2 prongs here. One is how do we make them see better, and number 2 is how do we slow these cars down. So that's when we brought up a speed bump or a stop sign. Those are kind of more complex issues. But the traffic and safety, if you kick it back, we already talked about the time frame, and Kosovo said absolutely not. He thinks it should be consistent. And the resident who lives in the block said absolutely not. It should be consistent. So he was for it. And actually, Janice Hamauer said this should be approved. Basically, she was for it. And that's why ultimately she said we need to slow these cars down also, because she stands out there counting. She's like, these cars are going so fast. So, but number 1 is the visual for these little kids that can't see.
Well, I guess the other question is, does it have to be the whole block? I mean, could we do something similar like what they do in the city when they block out a handicapped street parking thing, where you potentially, go no parking to a certain distance on either side of the crosswalk? So again, it opens the space up.
We talked about that too.
Okay.
And they didn't want to do that because it was, again, it's not consistent with the whole block. And actually, the residents who lived there said, I don't want that, because then, quite honestly, then they're all going to move their cars right in front of their house. So they didn't want that. So they talked about all of those issues, and we said, let's be consistent. If on Chestnut you can't park on the north side, it gives the kids a visual that are leaving McClure and leaving Laidlaw, that they can see at least one side of the street to get home. So those were all issues that were brought up.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your time and your comments, everyone. Ms. Van Besten, thank you for coming. Does everyone feel like they have a good handle on this so that they can vote on it at our next meeting? Perhaps we should keep it off the omnibus, or we'll put it on the omnibus, and then if someone wants to pull it for further discussion, we can do that.
Yeah, I'm concerned with it being on omnibus, because I think amongst even ourselves, we have different opinions as to what should be done. I'm wondering why we even need the whole north side to go with the consistency comments. Why is North Chestnut no parking, and we would do it just for this little block? Do we even need all of Chestnut to be no parking? Is that still a need now? Or is it something that was a long time ago?
We have the library, you have Grand Avenue, and the church. So you've got all of those in a row that I think are what those originated from.
And one other comment, Trustee Terrell. I wouldn't say our parking and traffic control is completely uniform across the whole village.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a fair point, but it is a big can to kind of tackle if we want to really try to have a uniform policy that would make sense, that could be applied in a lot of different areas.
And do you know, Director Supert or Chief Buds, how many streets are parking only allowed on one side? I know like around LT, there's only parking allowed on certain sides of the streets.
Quite a lot of the parks.
By the
Most
parks.
of the neighborhood parks have that kind of regulations.
Okay.
Cul-de-sacs do.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, but
Yeah.
we do have that data in our GIS.
A lot of Oak Street is on the north side because
Right.
it's narrow. And, I mean,
Yeah.
it's pretty prevalent, I would say, especially in the old towns, old areas of town.
Okay, well, let's put it on the agenda for our next meeting. We'll leave it out of the omnibus and vote on it separately then.
Okay.
Should I draft a traffic regulation ordinance consistent with the recommendation from TNS?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, thank you, everyone. Thank you for your comments and your concern. Appreciate it. Anything else, Trustee?
Oh, that concludes my report. Thank
Okay.
you.
Moving on to the General Government Committee, Trustee Timick.
Thank you, President Gallagher. Just a couple items to cover this evening. The first one is not anything that we're going to be taking action on here in February. It's more of an update. It's around the intergovernmental agreement that the Tollway Authority had provided to the village. It would be an agreement we would enter potentially with them to sort of set the guidelines and the parameters for the impact to the village relative to the expansion program of the, going on with the toll road. We did receive the draft agreement. Village staff and Village Attorney Jerusik have provided a redlined version of that, or I guess, sorry, to be more correct, they will provide that to us tomorrow for us to review. The ask is that we come back to them by the end of the week with any feedback we may have so that we can move this along. And, so again, nothing to act on in February other than just to please provide your feedback on the agreement. Next item up is a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of an addendum to the agreement we have relative to the French market. So I think I've covered this a couple of times in my updates. We have looked at this and discussed it in the General Government Committee, and we've made the recommendation that we move forward with a 3-year extension. The idea being is that we'd like to get the agreement in place sooner. Previous years we've done 1-year extensions. This will add a little bit more solidity, I guess, or to the agreement, and maybe see a better turnout from vendors. Also, by getting it done sooner in the season, they can advertise that we're going to be open for business and maybe draw some additional vendors to the market. So same day and everything else. It's just we're extending the agreement. Okay. And then the last one is, and I have to give kudos for Director Supert to throwing in the reference there a moment ago to help sell this, but it's a resolution approving and authorizing a professional services agreement with CloudPoint for a engagement relative to our GIS system, which is a geographic information system, and basically it's a software system that does I'll describe it as I understand it, and Director Supert can add on or correct me, but basically it's a mapping and tracking of our village infrastructure. Our system is kind of behind the times. We've budgeted $30,000 to bring a consultant in to help us update, modernize the system, standardize things, and we're recommending a 24-month agreement with this particular provider based on some research done with this from CloudPoint and 2 others. Director Supert, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add?
No, you covered the basis pretty well. Quick basic summary of what our GIS platform is. It's basically a database platform where we manage all of our infrastructure, all of our infrastructure planning. It covers most of the assets that we have out in the community, everything from the trees, forestry, to the roads, to all the infrastructure that we have underground. It's a core component of what we do for the Municipal Services Department in terms of how we operate, but it also ties into much of the rest of the organization, including the Finance Department. It's the base layer with our parcels and addresses for utility billing, coordinating with our Permits Department, and it's also one of the core features we used when we integrated and developed LTAC, migrating over there for 911 services. So it's critically important in terms of how we do a lot of our operations. Trustee Timick mentioned, we've had GIS for quite a while. We've had a system since 2003, which is very good for an organization our size. I think we're still ahead of the curve, but we haven't really kind of modernized it and kept it up to date. Things are moving to the cloud, and getting the rest of the organization to use it more fully is where we want to go with it. Right now, it's essentially myself and Assistant Director Bernacki, who's really utilizing and able to manage the software. We want to get the rest of the organization deploying it in the field and other.
And that's where the consultant will help with it?
Correct.
Thanks, Matt. So items B and C, the 2 different agreements, those would be on the omnibus.
We'll put them on.
Yep, okay, and that concludes my report. Thank you.
Just had one question on it, if I may.
Oh, yeah.
It was a good write-up, so thank you. It made a lot of sense. I was just kind of curious, did you discuss much, like 1 year, 2 year, 3 year? Because it talked about how we no longer had part-time staff to do it. And the impression I got in reading it is there's going to be a lot of upfront work to get it converted and going, but I wasn't sure that the maintenance, years 2, years 3, at 30,000, you know, if that was something that was, you know, how necessary that was going forward.
We did discuss that in the committee meeting, and the idea was, is to your point, there would be a lot of upfront work, but then there'd be some residual, I'll call it rollover work into the second year, and this would give us some leeway, but also not overextend us going with the 3-year term. And we still get some benefit from a discount with the 2 years as well.
And then reevaluate it after the end of
Absolutely.
2 years, whether it's useful or not, or whether it'd be better to have some part-time
Exactly.
type work
Yep.
in-house. Okay.
There was actually even some discussion around what some of the other villages are doing and what, you know, sort of how we compare to that, things like that. So I think it was well considered, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Timick. Last but not least, Planning and Zoning, Trustee Terrell.
Thank you, President Gallagher. We have discussed the North Side TIF a couple of times, and what we need to do, we need board action on whether to authorize an engineering study. I believe it's engineering with Tesk and Associates. They need to look at two things. One, is it eligible to put that North Side, are we eligible for that North Side TIF? And the second is there a redevelopment plan in place? Because you have to have a redevelopment plan in place before you can get a TIF. We have discussed this, and I think we need board action on that tonight. I don't know if that's tonight.
That's correct, that's
Okay.
tonight. So, we can have discussion now, or we can have discussion once we have the motion on the floor.
Is it gonna be an omnibus, or is it gonna be separate?
No, it's separate, it's
It's tonight.
tonight.
We vote
It's agenda item number 10.
Okay, so I'll save my discussion.
Okay. Good,
Okay, that's all I have.
all right.
We move into that, do I make that motion now for that, service
Actually,
contract?
yeah, we can, well, is there any other business anybody has? No. Then we will move on to the special meeting portion of our combined meeting and consider and act on 3 agenda items. The first one, Resolution 192474. Trustee Terrell.
Okay. I would have a motion to approve and authorize the execution of an agreement between the Village of Western Springs and Tesk Associates for the purposes of furnishing professional and technical assistance with the connection with creation of the proposed downtown North Tax Increment Financing District and preparation of an eligibility report and the project redevelopment plan for the proposed downtown North Tax Increment Financing District.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion?
Yeah, so, one item that I had a question on, was to see sort of the EAVs of the properties on the north side and what might, come about, over, you know, a 3 or 5 or 10-year period. So that was one open question, and then kind of goes back to sort of the, just the timing that we had just recently completed the south TIF, and didn't at that point include the north TIF with it. And I saw your comments, Director Scott, and I appreciated those. Did WISPA weigh in on, were they indifferent between south and north? I guess what concerns me is there's a lot of discussion that the south side needed a lot of work, and then if it's going to be shifted to the north, was there any, like how that gets balanced or anything like that?
To date, there hasn't been any specific weigh-in from them. If the board would approve the contract, they'd be part of what we would do with a little bit of stakeholder interview and getting the word out to them to say, if you're interested, please comment on this. The only thing I can tell you is more anecdotal from speaking with business owners that are in the south side TIF and specifically property owners, and sometimes they're one and the same. At first, if they don't know about it, they question it, ask questions, and then typically they're glad, honestly, that they're in the TIF because they know that themselves or others are going to benefit from that and just kind of, you know, raise the tide as far as property values and investments and things looking better. So, no, as far as any comments just yet, because we haven't solicited them, but that'll be coming.
What about when we did the South TIF? Was there any feedback from the other taxing bodies about, you know, pushback if we did another one or anything like that? I mean, was there any?
At that time, no, we didn't really raise that with them. And so far, I think I mentioned last time, there hasn't been any significant comments one way or the other from taxing bodies. There's a period coming up where we would, you know, notify them, a whole legal to-do list, if you will, that we have to let them know about our intentions if you go forward. And they're all used to that from the taxing body. You know, their regular duties during a typical year, if they've got other like LT, for instance, a bigger district is used to talking to LaGrange about that. So it's not something to be shocking to them, and they know they have a chance to weigh in.
Director Scott, does TESCA do that as well as the property owners? Do they go out and put the notice out?
No, we do that mostly in-house and with the help of Attorney Drusic's firm. Yeah, it's clearly spelled out in state law and TIF law, essentially.
We're required to do it.
Correct.
All the owner of the adjoining land and also the taxing bodies, all of them that take from that property.
Correct.
Yeah, we give a public notice in a newspaper, and then we do a mailing to everyone, every property owner within the TIF district, the proposed TIF district, and then to all folks within a 750-foot radius of the proposed TIF boundary will get notice.
Director Scott, you have spoken informally with a couple of the superintendents, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. And their response, can you
It was
remind us?
neutral, either, well, mostly all neutral. Nothing negative, and taxing bodies typically aren't specifically in favor of TIFs. I mean,
Right.
they're more likely to be neutral or opposed, and so there's not much feedback beyond that.
Okay,
Not much feedback overall, to be clear.
thank you. Any other discussion? No? Clerk Fitzgerald, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Trustee Hansen?
Aye.
Trustee Timick?
Aye.
Trustee Allen?
Nay.
Trustee Rudolph?
Aye.
Trustee Zimmerman is absent. Trustee Terrell?
Aye.
President Gallagher?
Aye. Thank you. Then we'll move on to our other two agenda items for action tonight, both coming out of Properties and Rec Committee. Trustee Hansen.
Thank you, President Gallagher. I'd like to make a motion to waive all bids regarding the 2019 landscape contract.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Roll call vote, please, Clerk Fitzgerald.
Trustee Hansen?
Aye.
Trustee Timick?
Aye.
Trustee Allen?
Aye.
Trustee Rudolph?
Aye.
Trustee Zimmerman is absent. Trustee Terrell?
Aye.
President Gallagher?
Aye. Thank you. Agenda item number 9.
Thank you. And I would now like to make a motion to waive the bid process for the 2019 landscape contract and authorize village staff to solicit competitive proposals for the 2019 landscape contract.
I'll second.
All right, roll call vote, please.
Trustee Hansen?
Aye.
Trustee Timick?
Aye.
Trustee Allen?
Aye.
Trustee Rudolph?
Aye.
Trustee Zimmerman is absent. Trustee Terrell?
Aye.
President Gallagher?
Thank you, aye. Okay, moving on to the reports. My report tonight, in your packet was the resume from Elizabeth N. Welsh. I intend to appoint her as a member of the Police Pension Board for a three-year term to expire in February 2022 at our next meeting, if there's no objection. Also, I'd like to remind everyone that the Tollway will be here next, at our next meeting to present on the sound wall study. So we invite all residents to come with their questions or with their interest. On Friday, I attended a press conference that was called by Congressman Lipinski, in which he asked the US EPA to immediately shut down Sterigenics, given that the most recent results from ambient air testing showed inconsistent and at times very high level of emissions in Willowbrook. Leader Durkin also was there, and he called for an immediate shutdown, as did Mayor Trilla, and both said whether the shutdown is through the EPA and its regulatory authority or through the court system by issuing a temporary restraining order, but something must be done because of the fluctuating emissions, that it appears that Sterigenics does not have that under control. The issue is that Sterigenics is currently operating within its permits, but those permits are based on old data, old categorization of the emissions, the ethylene oxide emissions, and the US EPA has since ranked them at a more toxic level, but the permits have not been reissued to reflect that. After the conference, I spoke with Congressman Lipinski regarding issues with the West Underpass and BNSF, and he told me he has recently been appointed chair of the Rail Subcommittee in the House, and that's a subcommittee of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. So that's an influential committee. We're happy that he has been placed in a position of authority there. He already, again, expressed his support for our concerns with the West Underpass, and he's working on a solution through the committee. On Saturday, Director Cherry, Manager Valkme, and I attended the WCMC Legislative Breakfast. There were many representatives in attendance, but only Chris Welch among our representatives. Mike Quigley spoke of a comprehensive infrastructure and transportation plan that he hopes will be coming out within the next 6 months or so, and he emphasized the importance of notifying our reps of our issues related to transportation and infrastructure. With the state reps, they are confident that a state capital bill will be adopted soon, and said to make sure that our qualifying capital projects are known to our reps. Manager Valkme will be directing staff to work on that, so that we'll be prepared when, I'm not going to say if, but when a capital bill is adopted. The representatives were also very confident that the statewide minimum wage bill will pass. That came out of the Senate on February 7th and will move to the House this week, most likely for a vote. And the bill moves the current statewide minimum wage from $8.25 today to $9.25 on January 1 and $10 on July 1, 2020. Then to $11 on January 1, 2021, and $1 annually to $15 in 2025. Compared to the Cook County ordinance, which is currently at $11 and increases to $12 on July 1, 19, and then $13 on July 1, 20. But then after that, the Cook County ordinance's minimum wage will be adjusted upward based on a rate of inflation. So I believe this is good news that the state is considering this, and since we already adopted the Cook County minimum wage, this will help to level the playing field for our businesses in town. The reps also spoke of a bill pending that will allow both home rule and non-home rule municipalities to impose a motor fuel tax, which is good news, but there wasn't any details as to how that would go about. But at least that's something. They also spoke of restoring the 10% LGDF, that's Local Government Distributive Fund, that the state recently appropriated from municipalities. But this would be done in phases over time, ending in 2023 with the full 10%. After the program, we all spoke with two of the Cook County commissioners, Commissioner Tobolsky and Silvestri, regarding our Bemis Woods project and the connector path, and they offered to help resolve our outstanding issues. So as staff continues to negotiate with the Forest Preserve, we hope to involve them as well to get a favorable solution. And then Wednesday evening, please join Senator John Curran and me at Western Springs Salerno's for an informal meet and greet. It's a good opportunity to meet one of our state reps without driving to Springfield. So please come with your Valentine and your questions for Senator Curran. And then it's a little, it's sad for us, but we're very happy for our clerk. She's moving on to bigger and brighter things. Tonight is her last night officially as our clerk. She's been a wonderful, bright addition to the board, and we will all truly miss her. Bridget, I just have a little going away gift for you, and we wanted to thank you for your service.
Oh, that's too much. Well, thank you. Oh my goodness. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's so sweet.
Appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for everything. Really appreciate it. And then just a happy Valentine's Day to staff and residents. And that concludes my report. And trustees, of course. Village Manager Velkme.
Thank you, President Gallagher. I was not going to have a report, but I started thinking about that. I wanted to acknowledge all of our staff and also the people at ComEd who have been working very hard these past 2 weeks to make sure that they restore power when power goes out, that our streets are salted, snow is removed, that there is assistance when there are accidents in the street, and also when people require medical assistance, and also that our residents have a place to go, rec center or so, to play basketball while the power is out and so forth. So, and I'd really like to thank everyone for that. So it's been quite challenging. So, and then also on behalf of staff, we will miss Clerk Fitzgerald very much. So thank you very much for everything.
Thank you. Attorney Jerusik?
No further report tonight other than to wish Clerk Fitzgerald the best going forward.
Thank you. Okay, may I have a motion to recess to close session?
President Gallagher, I'll make a motion to recess to closed session for the purpose of discussion of the selection of a person to fill a public office as defined in this act, including a vacancy in a public office when the public body is given power to appoint under law or ordinance, or the discipline, performance, or removal of the occupant of a public office when the public body is given power to remove the occupant under law or ordinance.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I will second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
We gotta do roll call.
Oh, roll call, please. One last time, Clerk Fitzgerald.
Your last roll call.
Trustee Hansen.
Aye.
Trustee Timick.
Aye.
Trustee Allen.
Aye.
Trustee Rudolph.
Aye.
Trustee Zimmerman's absent. Trustee Tyrell.
Aye.
Motion.
Thank you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are now in closed session. We will come back and reconvene in open session only for the purpose of closing that meeting as well. We will not discuss any action items or any other business. Thank you for attending. Good night and good evening.